With 2022 coming to a close, what a great year it has been for the Get Your Life Together Girl podcast. I can't thank you enough for your support and really listening to all of the great interviews, mindset resets, meditations, and even just solo conversations. In the next 4 days, I will be releasing the top episodes of 2022. And we're kicking it off with a deep dive, episode 37, Brain Hacking Your Way Out of Procrastination and the Lack of Motivation. I hope you enjoy listening to it for the first time or hearing it once again. Hey everyone, welcome to the Get Your Life Together Girl podcast. I'm your host, Danielle Van. As a cognitive behavioral therapist, life coach to women, and author, I've spent my life studying and learning from the stories that make us human. It's my passion and goal to help you shift your mindset and create a lifelong revolution to help you reach your greatest potential. This week, we're taking a one-on-one deep dive into shifting our mindset around those times that we lack motivation, when we have intentions and desires, but can't simply move ourselves forward. At least that's what we tell ourselves. We're taking on a different approach to motivation as we dive into procrastination, what it is at its root, and we're going to tie it all back to our mindset and our thinking patterns, because honestly, that's generally the true culprit. These stifling habits have a way of derailing our best intentions. So let's shift our perspective and our ability to mindfully move ourselves into grounded action. The Get Your Life Together Girl podcast starts right now. You know, procrastination is pretty interesting, right? So lacking motivation can be one of the biggest obstacles someone faces when it comes to the, quote, things they wish would show up in their lives. I hear this quite often, that there's a goal, a desire, even a basic need that needs to be met or a healing path that needs to be taken. But there's this inner delay that continually finds its way into place. This action goes by so many names. You know, some call this a mental block, lack of energy, uncertainty, the dreaded experience of overthinking, even willpower. Are you starting to see that we aren't just talking about physical procrastination today? I'm not talking about delaying or lack of desire to say, get up and clean the house. No, we are diving into all the elements that show up when we failed to thrive in our lives. You know, the behavior pieces and the thinking processes that hold us in place. When I've spoke about this sort of temporary full stop in the past, it's not uncommon that I hear, oh, I definitely hold myself back, or I stop myself from doing what I need to, but I literally have no idea why I can't get started when something is so important to me. Or I hear, I'm not sure why I can't finish once I get going. You know, once I find the motivation to start an action, I swear it's like I just can't move forward. I even had a woman from the Get Your Life Together Girl Instagram page write me not too long ago and say, quote, I feel like sometimes I just allow myself to procrastinate in the name of self-care or because the day feels like there's just too much to handle. Yet at times, I think I just avoid dealing with other real issues. How can I stop tricking myself into not doing what I need? Or is this just who I am? Oh man, you know, whether this woman realizes it or not, there's so much brilliant awareness in what she wrote in. You see, what she wrote was she finds herself making excuses, holding herself back, avoidance, tricking herself. You know, it's all interconnected. As to the question, is this who I am? Listen, for anyone that procrastinates, this is for you. I need you to hear me. No. Procrastination is a habit. It's not a character trait, right? So it's something that we do. It's not necessarily innate. It can become that way if we change our thinking pattern into a negative mindset. But right now, at the baseline, who you are is not procrastination. So important to witness this understanding. Because once we realize that there is a true rhythm or behavior to lacking motivation and procrastination, we then have the power to literally brain hack our way into something that does work for us. So let's tie it all together. Let's look at willpower, avoidance, when we should be pushing through despite our discomfort. And then let's walk down a path of thought that really happens when procrastination or the lack of motivation is in full swing. And then at the end, let's take a really good swing at good self-care and how we can use it to benefit ourselves when we fall into that deep, and I do mean deep, procrastination loop. How does that sound? Let's first start with our definition of procrastination, right? So it's an act of unnecessarily postponing decisions. Unnecessarily, meaning no real contributing factors or outlining experiences that are forcing us to stop our action. So what is the difference? I'm going to put it into a really visual moment for you, because this is something everyone can easily visualize, and place yourself inside, which is important when we're looking at our behaviors. So let's say a runner is training for a marathon. She looks outside and sees blue skies, but she's a bit tired. It's been a long day. She's sore from yesterday. And all of a sudden, as she looks outside, there's a list of excuses that flows through her head. Right? She debates for some time. She could really just suck it up and go, or she could give into that desire and not take the run. Overthinking begins to take place until she stops herself from taking the action that she intended, perhaps even just a few hours before. With that single decision, she's now forced her training schedule to shift, right? There's real consequences when we hold ourselves in place. Some may say, okay, seriously, it's just one run. What's the big deal? And the big deal would be that when you're training for a long race, a marathon, you need a consistent regimen in order to be in your best shape mentally, emotionally, and physically in order to really reach that end goal, to taking on the task of a full marathon. So any factor that is unnecessary puts us in a stop point. It tanks our motivation and we move into procrastination, even if it's just short time. But what's so important about this part is really the unnecessary factors. Think about it. The woman looked outside and didn't see any reason, any unnecessary factors that she shouldn't go out and take a run. Instead, she gave herself that list of excuses and then she didn't take the first step. There was nothing, though, that was physically actually holding her from meeting her goal. Now, if the runner looked outside and saw a hailstorm, that would be a warranted decision to not run outside, right? So those are very simple explanations, but there is a big difference, and I hope that you can see that. So the unnecessary would be anything that really we use as our excuse that can be removed by simply looking at, is this a necessary factor to hold me in place? This all comes down to one element, one single factor that we'll talk about in just a moment. But first, procrastination really becomes detrimental when or if we stop working toward what we need and what we want. And whether we realize it or not, procrastination is actually associated with a wide range of issues. So those issues are stress, mental health issues, anxiety, the fear of failure, lack of purpose, lack of planning. So that would be those abstract or undefined goals, an urgency mindset, perfectionism. I could go on for days here, but those are some of the big top pieces that really force us to stand in place and to really procrastinate. And yet, even with that list, most people live under the misconception that people who procrastinate are, merely lazy. They lack self-awareness, they lack self-esteem, or they have willpower issues. We sort of question, like that sweet woman from Instagram wrote in about, is this me? Is this who I am? But if you look at our list, there's one thing that comes into play with every single one of those issues, whether it's fear of failure or lack of purpose, planning, perfectionism, doesn't matter what it is. More times than not, our thinking is the issue, right? So there's your big first aha. When we procrastinate, it's generally because of our thinking. What we think and how we think is the baseline of everything. Of course, this is not discounting trauma or your past experiences, but it is to say that those things have impacted your thinking patterns, and therefore we're still at square one with our thinking being the number one culprit that causes us to put ourselves into a standstill, feel uncertainty, unmotivated, and most definitely incapable. So if our thinking is at the core of our procrastination, our tanking willpower, or even our avoidance, then we must know that we can brain hack our way out of procrastination by changing the thought pattern and the process, right? Now, there is something important to point out here. The most productive, mindful people in the world at one time or another procrastinate. Our world is filled with so many distractions, digital distractions, social media, overrun calendars, the impossible overloaded to-do list. And sometimes that alone has us standing in place, exhausted, and really unwilling to move ourselves into action, which is where we're going to talk about self-care at the end. And truthfully, even with those list of behaviors and a noisy outside world, procrastination isn't always a bad thing as long as it doesn't become habitual. Sometimes we need a timeout, and that's okay. What we really want to talk about right now is that hustle and that inability to really shift into action. So those are the pieces we want to really look at when it comes to procrastination. But before, let's explore how when we give up our goals, refuse to do the necessary work, whether that's healing or any other growth factors, that we can really fall into that lack of action that really doesn't work for us. So as I said just a few moments ago, procrastination has a rhythm. It literally has a pattern that we can actually witness in some element or another. And I want to take you down that path so that you can see how it unfolds. Because witnessing this really opens our eyes and helps us stop the action, right? This unfolding before it becomes a full-on event. Now, before we take this first step on witnessing this path, there's something that I'm going to ask for you to do right here and now. If you're one that really identifies yourself as a procrastinator, I would love for you to really release that label actively and consciously. So how, right? So how can I do that? And it starts by changing the words you identify with. So here's the deal. Labels, whether it's procrastination or unworthiness, unloved, or any negative ownership labels, thinking those words, feeding them to yourself through your inner and outer conversations, cements these labels into your mindset. It even creates a habitual pattern of excuses in your thinking. All to say, when you practice a thought enough, I am a procrastinator, it becomes your truth. You are literally teaching your brain to believe this statement. This level of believing then moves into a belief. When we hold beliefs, they become the baseline, the foundation of our thought process. When we have negative beliefs, they begin to then tear apart our self-worth. That sounds like, I'm not going to try, because I'm not going to get it done anyway. We might even say, it won't matter. I'm just going to mess it up. Do you hear those full stop sentences? Do you hear the blocks in your motivation? Why try? I'm just going to mess it up anyway. These are the words that come from practiced thoughts taking root as negative beliefs. We have to unglue, literally unstick this label of our thinking in our mindset so that we don't fall upon our excuses and hold an attitude of failure that really points inward at ourselves. Because if we never give ourselves a chance to succeed, how will we succeed? I mean, that seems really simple, right? But it's the truth. If you don't think you can do something, you can't. So instead of saying, I'm a procrastinator, you might flip the script and try these words instead. I procrastinate. Or sometimes I take more time than I truly need to complete a task. Or eventually I meet my goals. I'm focused really on becoming better and taking first steps. Do you hear the difference? I'm a procrastinator. It's negative. I sometimes take more time than I need to complete a task. That's really a neutral statement that has the power to move you in the right direction and become a positive. When we are in negative thought patterns, we must identify the thought, meet it where it is, ask ourselves why, and then move it into a neutral statement before we can ever reframe it into a positive action. What is even more important to point out is shifting these thoughts through small attitude and mindset shifts gives us the wherewithal to see this as an action, a thought-based issue, rather than, as that woman asked, a nasty character flaw. This works with everything from I'm always late to I'm a loser, I'm stupid, I never get anything right. All those negative thoughts that are practiced into procrastinating beliefs. Even removing just these pieces helps to fire up our motivation, even if it's only by 1%. 1% motivation is 1% extra motivation, right? Yes. So let's walk hand in hand down that thinking path. And let me show you how procrastination and the lack of motivation shows up and escalates in our thinking before we physically put ourselves into a stop. Again, if you can recognize this, you can really stop it before it becomes a bigger issue. Okay, let's say you have an abstract goal. If you haven't listened to the Goals podcast, go back and listen to it. It takes you down the path of defining solid goals. But for today, let's say you've been thinking about the need to heal, to take a healing journey. Perhaps there are things in your past that continually cycle in your head. And for quite some time, you've really moved your intentions and your thoughts into doing something about it, right? So it becomes obvious that these memories or these stories are not going to stop coming up until you do something about them. Thus, the thought, I need to heal. Let's get a bit deeper too with this understanding. First, we've witnessed that there is a need, but haven't taken the first step as of yet. So what happens? These thoughts pop up again, and usually they happen when we're doing mundane tasks. So like folding the laundry, doing the dishes, when you're in the carpool lane at your kid's school. You can even feel them creeping in when perhaps the house is quiet or there's a disagreement of some sort. In essence, you know that they're there. They're present in your awareness, but they come at times that you sort of just put a mental pin in place as to say, I'll address that someday. Or I want to address these feelings, but then doubt and fear take over or uncertainty takes over and you really don't know where to take the first step, right? So the how. How will I give myself direction as to start this healing journey? What will this healing journey entail? When we don't have a clear how, we don't start the work. More so, when we don't give ourselves a true why, we sit in our thoughts, right? We've all done that. That sitting can cause us to create an even greater suffering beyond our inaction. I mean, think about it. Knowing that you need something is different than, say, having the motivation to act. It's even different than having the motivating factor. The motivating factor is really the why, and the how really works within the thought process. An example would be these memories keep surfacing. I need to heal so I can begin to repair the relationship I have with myself and others. I'm going to do that through seeking perhaps therapy or journaling or taking a course, whatever it might be that aligns with your desires and needs. Those pieces are clear factors and clear motivational starting points. if you're still confused, the starting points would be one, acknowledging that the need for healing is there, and two, really giving yourself the ability to seek what you need, whatever aligns with you. So that would be the motivating factors of seeking therapy or journaling or taking that course. If we don't have those clear thoughts, right, the why, the how, that often leads us to saying, I don't know what to do. And if I don't know what to do, I'm just going to put myself in this holding pattern. And that really is the starting point of procrastination. This is sort of step one of that path, because of course, if you don't know where you're going, it's really impossible to get there. From the outside, it looks like procrastination or lack of motivation to others. But inside, what takes over is uncertainty. I don't know what to do. Right? What is that? That's uncertainty. This is really the second step on our path that we're walking together. When we are uncertain, what happens? Our thoughts tend to scatter. Some even experience racing thoughts or negative self-talk. We get into these places where we have unhealthy thought cycles. The thoughts we practice and agree with then create an emotional rise, which then leads us into action. If we feel negative, it's not like we're going to be motivated to go out and do good for ourselves. No, when we feel stuck and unsure, our anxiety rises. It's a natural process. So many people say, I don't even know why I have anxiety. And generally, it's because of this piece, not knowing where to start, having uncertainty. Because uncertain thinking sparks our brain chemistry. From there, fear can take over. We begin to put our rewards, right? So the actions, the doing, the rewards, so far out into the future that getting started for anything seems unnecessary. It's going to take me probably 2 years to heal all of this trauma. That's so long. I'm not sure I have that kind of time or really want to invest that kind of energy. Remember our marathon runner, how she looked outside and saw the clear blue sky and still said, not today? This is it. When we don't know how to do something, or when things are not happening for us the way we think that they should, we tend to go deeper in our thought process and disconnect further from ourselves. That disconnection moves us one more step on our path, and that is into a place of deeper indecision, which of course opens the door to that nasty beast of forecasting, how things are going to play out without having all the details. It even leads us into those what ifs and overthinking ourselves into nothingness. We give ourselves too many options, and we really begin to create a deeper deficit in our thoughts and our action course. When we do this, where are we on our path? The answer is standing still. Here's something to remember as well. The more important the decision, the more you have riding on the outcome, the harder it can be to make a decision once you've gotten into this place of unhelpful thinking patterns. Here's why. Anxiety is often a loop. Remember, I told you, when we don't know how, when we get ourselves into the overthinking pattern, anxiety rises. It's a natural occurrence. And anxiety is often a loop. So what do I mean by that? Well, you have a task, you aren't sure how to start or to make it happen, so you do nothing. The anxiety rises higher because we begin to self-punish by saying, why are you not doing what you need to do? Which causes more inaction, which then causes more anxiety. So loop, cycle, not only in our thought process, but in our emotional and physical actions too. So think about it. The thought comes in, I don't know what to do. So you stop. Your emotion rises. Attached to that feeling is maybe the words, you are stupid. Negativity spreads. Some may cry. Some may become angry. Some find their beds, because they're slipping into depression. All of these responses generally depend on a varying degrees of how long you've practiced this thought. But some go deep and really begin to look outside of themselves, wondering why they are not like everyone else. Why can't I be successful? Why can't I do what others have done? Why am I not further on my path? Loop, cycle, loop, cycle, right? I bet you've never looked at procrastination in this manner, but I know that you've probably felt it on some level before. Now, let's quickly move through 3 pieces that can add to our lack of motivation on the deepest level. So let's start with fear of failure. Look, failing is a natural part of life. It's a part of our growth and our development. When we fail, we learn. If we can give credit to our failures, we can give credit to the lesson. And with that credit, we can find ownership in our why. Yet because most people don't live within this mindset or keep their eyes wide open for these motivating factors we've been talking about, they have a tendency to translate that feeling into standing on the sidelines of their life. You can't fail if you do nothing, right? Just as we began to remove the label of procrastination out of our thinking by changing the verbiage, we can also assume that failure will in fact happen and therefore take the edge off of the fear. What is fear? It's the unknown. It's putting a negative spin on uncertainty and feelings of lack. Of course, it's deeper, but in this case, that's what fear is. Every great goal or desire, it has the potential to fail. It's a matter of how we confront the fear that will help us move onto the path of action, the path that our motivation is in full swing. Now let's look at the lack of purpose. Remember, this is the first place of our path, an unclear vision, an undefined goal. Let's take it a step further and say undeveloped intention. When we don't know our why, it's not surprising that we don't feel fulfilled or that we lack motivation. If there's no momentum pushing you forward, no inner fire or passion, or even a catalyst for your actions, why would you move yourself into action? Why would you strive to rise? We must stop looking at purpose as a one-off element, right? As a task. Purpose generally for most people is this sort of umbrella. But purpose is the reason for which something is done or created. Purpose is found in everything that we do. So we have to switch our thinking from this mass life umbrella, this movement, what is my purpose? What am I supposed to be doing? Am I doing everything through this intention? And really get into a movement of purpose being singular. Why is this thing, say this healing that we're using as our example, this action, this emotion, why do they exist? Why have they been created? What is their purpose? With this understanding, we can create momentum. This also de-escalates that anxiety loop because our why becomes clear. Purpose is the why. The definition of motivation is the reason or reasons one has for acting or behaving in a particular way. Hello, what's the definition of purpose, right? It's the reason why. The two walk hand in hand. Now, let's look at the urgency-driven mindset. This is really one that many people are in, and they never even realize it. And many do not understand that procrastination and this urgency-driven mindset are tied together. So what is an urgency-driven mindset? I want you to think of this as always being on edge, ready to put out fires, ready to solve other people's issues and problems because it offers you a sense of purpose and importance. Where are my people pleasers, right? This is it. It's here that we create an incredible sense of urgency around things that often have very little urgency in actuality. It's a way to avoid doing our own hard work. It's a way of feeling busy, therefore important, while putting off what really needs to be done for ourselves. This too is a thought pattern that keeps us steering ourselves away from, those undefined thoughts and goals while engaging in other people's priorities. While we may feel busy with this mindset, we're actually procrastinating in meeting our own needs. While many see themselves as the helpers in this role, they often also feel unmotivated in their own lives. You hear them say, I have no time for myself. I'm never getting anything done. I'm exhausted from fixing other people's problems. I don't even have time for myself. These are all excuses to delay their own work. It is a form of procrastination, whether we realize it or not. Now, here's a major part of procrastination that most people never realize as well. But you know me, I like to serve up those big truths. So, have you ever thought about true perfectionism as an act of procrastination? There is a difference with perfectionists, though. They often do get started. It's just as their perfectionism rages, it takes over their mindset and their thinking pattern. And many perfectionists fail to finish the task that they started. Really, we put it off to another time. The opposite of procrastination is doing the right thing at the right time. That would be like finishing the project, doing the task and the chores as they were assigned, whether it's self-assigned or assigned by someone else. But when you're a true perfectionist, often you have a million ideas and an accumulation of a ton of different unfinished tasks. Often we think of perfectionism only as needing to get something 100% right most of the time, whether it's a goal or a desire. We look at it this way, but there's so much more to perfectionism. It's riddled with full stops and holding patterns. It's riddled with procrastination. Why finish if it's not going to be perfect? This circles right back into our sense of fear, and it can even lead us into black and white thinking. Black and white thinking is a tendency to think in extremes. All or nothing, this or that. There's no middle ground. There's no gray area. It's also called polarized thinking because it keeps us from seeing the world as it is, full of different perspectives, different ways to reach the same goal. We don't look at it as complex. This is a hard state to live your life in because it's a self-sabotaging method that disrupts most areas of our existence. And as you know, with disruptions, we stop. There's great freedom in the words and thought patterns of practice makes progress, not perfection. Perfection is really a pointless task. What I think is perfect, you may think is half done. It's all about perspective, individual perspective. There's a state of perfection in all things, and there's a lack of it too. I know that's frustrating, but it's the truth. More so, not getting started and never finishing because of perfection or black or white thinking or being unsure really comes down to all of those elements colliding and creating a full stop. So let's review before moving into the how of unraveling this lack of motivation or even removing procrastination from our life. So why do we procrastinate? Well, because we avoid, because of anxiety, because of our thought pattern, because of our personal feelings of worth. It's important to point out right here that there is a difference between holding yourself back and simply not wanting to do something you've agreed to doing, right? There's a huge difference. I want to make that clear because many may question themselves from this angle, wondering if they're pushing themselves away from doing their own work, whatever that work is. If this is not a continual or habitual habit for you, then saying yes to something that you really don't want to do comes down to personal boundaries, not lack of motivation, not procrastination, not even willpower. So I want you to table that if you are really questioning that right now. Let's go back to brain hacking our way into action, back to breaking up with the impulses, anxiety, unwanted thought patterns, and feelings that keep us from our internal drive, the determination, self-discipline, self-control, resolve, momentum, our ability to really show up for ourselves in the fullest sense. As I have said, understanding why you are procrastinating can help you overcome it. So, beyond changing the words we label ourselves, we have to get into a focus of why. The first step is to identify the cause or the lack of motivation, the essential element of the procrastination. Was there something on that list before that you can quickly identify as to why you hold yourself in place? Is it fear? Is it uncertainty? Is it anxiety? Is it perfectionism? Is it people pleasing? What is it that often stops you the most? Or is it your self value? That sounds like I'm not good enough. Once you create an awareness around why, it becomes easier to create a plan and refocus. And before you toss out another, I don't know, I really want you to give yourself permission and space to investigate why. No one can do this for you. It's really up to you to look at your behaviors and get down to the foundation, into the why. The second step is to lean into what you're saying to yourself. What is the thought pattern? Is the why still connected to the negative self-talk, to self-doubt? There are times when we can overestimate our current abilities or even our current knowledge or even the difficulty of the task we're keeping ourselves from. We can really get into this understanding by listening to that internal language. If this piece feels like a struggle or it's something that feels impossible to get down to, a really great way to handle this, to approach it, is to act as if you're outsourcing a job, right? So you are the boss and you have to write out every step and direction that would need to be fulfilled to reach the end task. Go to a piece of paper and give it a try. If it doesn't work or this is a massive struggle, then clue into the language that's floating in the thought process. Is it that I don't know how, or I'm too stupid, or I'm unsure, or I'm afraid to fail? And then when you know what that language is, you can ask yourself, are those words true? Am I really incapable, or do I just not have all of the information that I need? Am I really stupid, or am I really just uncertain? Maybe the language points to the fact that you've taken on more than you realize. If so, then the question would be, how can I help myself? How can I really move into a good direction, a path of action, into motivation to take on smaller bits of my end goal, my end desire? We then want to really look at recognizing our behavior patterns. So we've looked at the thought patterns. Now let's turn to the physical action. You might be saying, but wait, I thought lacking motivation and procrastination is all about not taking action. So how can we look at actions that we aren't taking? Listen, the truth is, if you're not doing what you have intended to do, but you should be doing something on some level, it's likely that you're engaging in something else. So action is being taken, but you're not taking it in the step in which would best serve you. So let's say you're supposed to be meeting a therapist in their office, but instead you drive to get coffee. This would be taking action that negates the original intention, right? So we're still taking action. This works on all levels. Say you're supposed to be cleaning the house, but you get caught up watching a part of a documentary with the promise that as soon as this episode ends, you would, get up and clean. But then as it ends, you discover that the documentary has multiple episodes and automatically the documentary wins and, the house can wait. Like I said, this is something we must look at on a wide range. If you aren't taking action, the actions you desire and really need to take, where and what are you putting your focus on instead? Once you recognize your behavior patterns, it's time to give yourself a bit of a time out from distractions, from choosing a different action other than what you need to be doing, what you need to get started, what you have the lack of motivation for. right? So the best way to do this is to set a timer on your phone, say 20 to 30 minutes. This will help you encourage small, short-term focus points that you can really begin to commit to positive behaviors. That would look like, I know I want to begin this healing journey. So I'm going to set a timer on my phone for, say, 20 minutes, and I'm going to write my feelings in this journal. That will help you move into action without feeling like you are in a state of all or nothing. Any focused action that can get you from the starting point of procrastination and into forward movement is worthy. Whether it is 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 20 or 30, it doesn't matter. Don't look at the time itself. Just look at the fact that you are moving yourself into action. Now, back to this idea of undefined goals. When an intention has great weight to it, we can often become overwhelmed by the gravity of the task. When we're overwhelmed, we have to really turn our focus into breaking down what's holding us back into small, workable pieces, right? So if the task feels huge, we have to break them down into pieces that are easier to digest. It's here we can look at what we need, what we want, and how we're going to get there. It's here we can even really step up our greater understanding of our how and our why. It's in this motion that we create a goal that starts with big thinking and then moves back to small, realistic strategies. Very important, right? Because if we want to get out of that holding pattern, we have to have small, realistic pieces that we can actually do. Within a plan, when it's clearly defined, you begin to have a space that you understand intent, need, and even what you want to happen in the long term. We have to articulate the benefit of replacing the procrastination habit. So, what is the goal? What is the reward? If you were to break things down into workable pieces, what would you gain if you got started? This is so important. This is a huge piece of motivation. What am I going to gain if I put myself into action? And then you can give yourself milestones, little check-in points that allow you to feel your actions are worthy and not hindering. I know all of that sounds great, right? So I need to have a plan. I need to move these pieces into small strategies. I need to really look at my how and my why. But really, these are easy for me to toss out and say, okay, go do these things. And you're going to find yourself far more motivated and successful. And, you're going to feel great emotionally, mentally, and physically, even maybe spiritually. But when we are in holding patterns, when we are in deep procrastination, getting started, taking action often takes major commitment. And for some people, it even takes some self-force, right? So let me give you a few more simple practical tools to help you get out of avoidance. So I've told you what procrastination is, how it unfolds in our thought patterns, what it looks like in our behaviors, and even what we need to be looking for and how to get out of it. But let's get some practical tools that we can use every day so that we can stop the procrastination from really becoming this more life-shaking moment, right? That keeps us in the loop of anxiety and no action. So the first little tool would be to write a to-do list for each element that you are holding yourself in place for. So this is like your everyday to-do list, but it's geared towards one single event. So let's go back and use that healing journey that we've been talking about the whole time. That to-do list would look and sound something like, number 1, define my goal. What's my why? What is it that I need to heal? Number 2, perhaps research the steps that would best serve me. So maybe that's investigating different types of therapy. Maybe you want to look at journaling techniques. Maybe you are interested in emotional freedom tapping or Reiki or meditation or any of these other modalities that we have to really help people to heal. Next on the list, number 3 would be to choose a course of action. Number 4 would be define a starting date. 5, give myself reward points for showing up, so what are they and how often will I reward myself for taking action? Number 6 would be to create a flexible timeline of your actions. Perhaps you're willing to commit to, say, 6 months of twice a month therapy. This would be the piece that you would write down so that you could create a timeline. You see what I mean? This is really creating a targeted to-do list that will help you know when to start, why to start, and how you're going to get there. Big thing, very easy task when you put pen to paper that really does have a massive benefit to help us get out of procrastination. The next small tool will be to use the 10-minute rule. I just told you about removing distractions and setting a timer, right? So we were talking about the 20 minutes, the 30 minutes. But for some, 20 minutes still feels impossible. If your procrastination and your lack of motivation has been deeply entrenched for a long period of time, 20 minutes is going to feel like a lifetime. So use the 10-minute rule. Give yourself 10 minutes, right? Just 10 minutes to get started. Doesn't matter what the task is. But in those 10 minutes, you will have put yourself into action. And when those 10 minutes are up, you can start to gauge how you feel. Most people realize that they can go further. They realize that they can push themselves just a bit more. Regardless if you're going to push yourself or not, it's important to ask, am I ready to quit? Or do I have another 10 minutes to write or to do whatever it is that I must focus on? The last tool that I'm going to give you, it really is my favorite. And it is a task that sometimes is hard for people, but it is a tool that really has great impact. And that is to pair your hardest task with someone or something that you enjoy, trust, or feel is a support system for you. Now, don't do this. Don't invite someone out and begin to dump all of the reasons why you can't move into action right into their lap, right? That isn't what I'm talking about here. And most people really get turned off by that. But what I am saying is call a trusted friend. Call a loved one, let them know that you are struggling with motivation, that you really are struggling with moving into action, and ask them up front, can you support me? Can you be a sounding board that helps really show me where the lack of motivation is coming from? The deal is this: your emotions, just like your thoughts, play a major role in your motivation level. If you're feeling depressed or anxious or sad or alone, you're going to have a harder time getting motivated. So pair the work with someone or something that you enjoy. Go out for a walk with a friend and talk to them. Go out for a walk on your own and listen to music while you mentally journal the healing that you're intending to create, if that's the thing that's holding you in place. Give yourself permission to do whatever it is that helps you feel connected while moving into action. That's the big thing, right? What is it that I need to allow myself to feel, to think, and to do? Big questions, but important questions to look at. Now, I did say we'd look at self-care, so let's do that. Self-care in this sense, I really want you to shift your focus and not think about the hair appointment and the bubble baths and the spa day, right? That is self-care. But in this moment, self-care looks a little bit different. It comes down to looking at the state of your life. Are you living life in an unrealistic pace where you're mentally and physically exhausted? Or even if you've moved yourself into a state of constant hustle that's not serving you? When we get there, what happens is we burn out. And when we burn out, we procrastinate as a form of self-preservation. So important to understand. And it's here we have to start looking at our self-care routine. True self-care beyond the standard of what we see all over social media is really about adopting a mindset that makes your physical and mental health a priority. Real self-care goes back to looking at your thinking patterns and behaviors and really eradicating something that doesn't work. It's things like saying no to extra obligations without guilt when you're tapped out. It's showing up for yourself so that you can show up for others. It's setting boundaries, standing up for yourself. It's being mindful instead of living with a mind that is always full. It's making your health on all levels a priority. True self-care is in the words. It's caring for the self. If you find yourself limited in your motivation, putting yourself in full stop moments, look at whether or not you're nurturing yourself the way that you should. Look at whether or not self-care is within your daily practice. Self-care is about knowing your limits. It's decompressing and staying focused on what you really need to do. It is really going inward and saying, what is my why? What do I need? What do I want? Ultimately, all of this comes down to our thoughts, how they guide us, how we feel, and the actions we are taking or simply are not. Make time for those things that are the most important, and those things always begin and end with you. So, are you going to move yourself in action? Are you going to take the first step? Are you going to get out of the place where you're holding yourself at the starting line, uncertain, unsure, and really moving into a space that you can do what best suits you, not only now, but tomorrow and also for the future? You do deserve that. And it's an essential step into getting your life together, girl. Thank you so much for listening to the Get Your Life Together Girl podcast. If you have enjoyed these tips for bettering your life, please subscribe and turn on the notifications to be alerted each week when a new episode is released. We'd love for you to leave a review on the platform of your choice, as it really helps us grow and spread this message to others who need it. You can follow us on social media at Get Your Life Together Girl on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. Or you can visit the show notes and our website at getyourlifetogethergirl.com, as well as the Get Your Life Together Girl blog. And you can even sign up for our weekly newsletter for motivational tips and inspiration. Until next time, be kind to yourself and others.